Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Prose podcast. I'm your host, Tally Shamus, and today I've got a bonus episode for you where I will be critiquing one of our listeners' query letters. And the listener is joining me here today. So Krystal Elkhoury is a writer who will be reading her own query letter, and I will be providing her with personalized feedback. Now, I want to state that all feedback mentioned in this episode is my personal opinion and should not be taken as fact. All writers should make their own decisions based on what's best for them in their querying journey, but I have had significant success in my own journey, and so I want to share the lessons that I've learned with all of you. If you would like a chance to have your own work critiqued, please reach out to me at hello@tallyshamus.com and send your query letter and a brief description of your work. I'll be in touch. So, Krystal, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for your bravery in sharing your query letter for all of our listeners to hear and learn from.
Thank you, Tally, so much. Definitely, I'm ready to be the first sacrifice on the chopping block, so thank you for having me.
Of course. So, Krystal, do you want to start us off by reading your query letter?
Definitely, yeah. All right, so dear Agent, I'm excited to share The Necromancer's Wife, a 110,000-word adult low fantasy. This novel is a melting pot of necromancy and sapphic romance in the vein of Nicki Preto's Bonesmith, the alchemy, magic systems, and government conspiracies evocative of Hiromu Arakawa's Fullmetal Alchemist, alongside the search for a missing person behind enemy lines from Saving Private Ryan. Retired necromancer Layla Noor is living in suburban comfort when she learns that famed alchemist Sabah Samar was captured by the enemy to be coerced into making biochemical weapons to win the devastating war between Galum and the Allied forces. Falsifying military documents, Layla joins the strike team tasked with extracting the alchemist at any cost, even if it means retrieving a dead body. The only problem, the alchemist is her wife. Dodging danger, detainment, and death while traveling across volatile war zones, Layla must balance keeping secrets from the team she's growing close with and uncover why the Allied governments are willing to sacrifice mancers and alchemists like her wife to turn the tide of the war. It's a race against time and imperative that Layla find her wife alive. While necromancers can raise the dead, they cannot bring back the person that once inhabited the corpse. Layla knows well that every form of magic comes with a cost, and she's willing to pay the price to ensure her wife survives, even if every corpse she reanimates for information and survival shortens her own life. As a bisexual Lebanese American, it's long been my dream to publish stories for and about readers like me. I've been writing for almost 20 years in half a dozen different countries around the world. I enjoy blogging about various fandoms online, and I'm the co-creator of the pitch event Mina Pit and co-host of Poster Pit. Currently, I'm a professor of English composition, literature, creative writing, and poetry. Off campus, I enjoy working on puzzles, paintings, and keeping my hands busy when they're not typing. The full manuscript is available upon request. I appreciate your consideration. Very best, Krystal Elkhoury.
Thank you so much, Krystal. So first off, I want to say this is already a very strong query letter. I think you've done a great job here. I love the story. Honestly, I would pick up this book and read it. So it's fantastic. But I will go through and, help you pick out some aspects of it that I think can be fine-tuned to make this a little bit more attractive to an agent. So let's start right at the beginning. So the word count is beautiful, perfect for low fantasy, right in the middle of that 80 to 120 word count you want. The melting pot of necromancy and sapphic romance. Love that. So good. Bonesmith, a great comp because it is recent. It is a fantasy. I personally love Nicki Preto because she's local to me, so I think that's really cool, but that's a great one. Fullmetal Alchemist, I love. I just worry that using that along with Saving Private Ryan, the fact that both of them are older. So I think that this sounds really interesting, but I would pick one of those, and my inclination, though I have no empirical data to back this up, I would go with Fullmetal Alchemist, and I would find a more recent book for the behind enemy lines of Saving Private Ryan. I feel like a lot of fantasy books recently have been using kind of these military themes, and I think that you could find a more recent fantasy that has those similar plot lines. I think that that's important to kind of keep it to more of a fantasy setting. So that's the one that I think I would replace. I would consider replacing Fullmetal Alchemist as well, But what I would do to inform myself on whether that's the best decision is look through your top agents' manuscript wish lists. So if someone that you really want to apply to has this in their wish list, definitely keep it in. Maybe there are other animes or similar materials on wish lists that could inspire your comps. That's actually one of the tricks I used when I was trying to figure out my comps. I would actually go to agents' manuscript wish lists and use their lists as inspiration for comps. Because number
Mhm.
one, you know that those are strong books that have sold well. And number two, especially if it's an agent you want to apply to, you're already aligning yourself with their wants. And if you do that while you're still drafting, you can actually take inspiration from those books that they're recommending, see how those writers plot, how they use pacing, how they develop their characters. So that's the feedback that I have for the first paragraph. Do you have any questions about that?
No questions. I definitely agree with what you're saying. And I obviously, okay, I need to clear the air. This is not the first draft, definitely. This has been polished almost, I wouldn't say perfection because there's no such thing as perfection, but it's been polished. The first draft, it will never see the light of day. And I have since gotten other feedback as well. And they also said the same thing about the comps. I did remove Saving Private Ryan. Only because I feel like Full Metal is a better as a manga in terms of, like, if we're talking, like, book medium, versus, like, an
Oh, right,
anime
right.
show, right? That it's
Right,
still
right.
technically a book, right?
Yeah, yeah, no,
But,
you're totally right.
I feel like the themes in Full Metal are more, closely related to the story elements, right? I mean, her wife is an alchemist, and that's a major part of, the story, so, I think that's an important comp to keep. Definitely, looking at other books. I wasn't sure whether or not to put in Gideon the Ninth in there because it's not as recent, but it is like sapphic necromancers, so I don't know to have 2 of the same thing or a more military leaning one, as you said. It's not, a super militaristic, book. I mean, the elements are there, but it's not the main focus, I would say. So,
Right.
I would have to balance that, I think, but definitely I agree with everything you've said so far.
Yeah, and Gideon the Ninth is one that you see on a lot of manuscript wish lists, so that's an
Mhm,
interesting one to consider. Another thing I would recommend is to set out your log line. So that's your character, the conflict, and the stakes in your very first paragraph. And that's something that I have spoken about on Substack, so I can direct you to those resources. But essentially, you want to have a strong hook right off the beginning. And I do think that your story in these narrative paragraphs that we're going to talk about has a very strong hook. But I do think that you could start the first paragraph off with that to get that agent's attention right away. Okay, so let's move on to your narrative paragraphs. So I, once again, love this story. This sounds so interesting. I love the Middle Eastern aspect of it. I love the stakes. You've got really good stakes here. The one thing that catches my eye, and I think the feedback that I'd like to put the most emphasis on here, is you have a lot of specialized language that
mhm,
makes it a little bit difficult to read. So I would make this a little bit more broad. I love that you have actual plot points because a lot of the time when we look at people's query letters, they're using a lot of vibes like, this is a story about sacrifice, it's a story about love, but you have actual plot points. I'm torn about whether you want to keep the fact that the alchemist is her wife until the end of that paragraph. I understand what you're trying to do with the twist. I just think that an agent isn't looking for a twist. They're not looking to be surprised. They're
mhm,
looking to understand the story and the stakes right away. So I think there are two problems that you might run into with saying Sabah Samar instead of her wife right off the bat. Number one, we don't know who Sabah is. And introducing two named characters in two lines right off the bat is overwhelming. Number two, we don't understand why it's important that Layla falsify these military documents and do all of this to get this alchemist back. So I think you actually might be shooting yourself in the foot here by leaving that for that one line. I also think that we want to avoid questions at all costs in
uh,
our query letters. So I wouldn't put the only problem the alchemist is her wife. I would recommend saying retired necromancer Layla Noor is living in suburban comfort when she learns that famed alchemist and her wife, or her wife, a famed alchemist, however you want to word that, was captured by the enemy to be coerced into making biochemical weapons. And you can even give it more of a plot point. You're creating
Mhm.
this picture of, she's a retired necromancer, she's enjoying her life. She comes home one day and suddenly her wife has been kidnapped. So her wife, a famed alchemist, has been kidnapped to be coerced into making biochemical weapons. I
Mhm.
don't think I would include to win the devastating war between Galum and the Allied forces. Maybe you can work in that there's a war if it's really important to your story, which it sounds like it might be, but we don't know who Galum is. We don't know who the Allied forces are. So that's
Mhm.
not really telling much. And once again, it's overwhelming with all this information that you just don't have background for as a reader. So I think that you can just stop it at devastating war. Falsifying military documents, Layla joins the strike team tasked with extracting the alchemist at any cost, even if it means retrieving a dead body. So I think that's great. Even if it means retrieving a dead body, I'm a little bit confused on why that's a big deal. Like, if
Mhm.
there's a war, presumably there are lots of dead bodies around. Why is it a big deal to retrieve one? So maybe there you could add a little bit more detail, like even if it means reanimating something, something like that,
Mhm.
which she had promised never to do again after her retirement. So I think that would help. So then, yes, I would remove this one sentence. The only problem, the alchemist is her wife. Okay, moving on to your second narrative paragraph. So I think I would start this with Layla, her name, just to make sure that we know we're still in Layla's POV. This isn't a dual POV thing happening. Who's dodging the dangers? Said it right at the beginning of the sentence. Layla must, dodging danger, little bit broad. I'd probably say something like Layla must escape from those trying to kill her, or something like that. What is
Mhm.
the danger? Tell us in specific words. Detainment, great, and death, perfect, while traveling across volatile war zones. Awesome. So I think here you already have that it's a war, so maybe you don't have to put that in the first paragraph, but I leave that up to you. It's fine to include that there's a war, I just would take out the specialized terms. Layla must balance keeping secrets. Again, I think I would set out what the secrets are here, just not to be so vague. From the team she's growing close with, and uncover why the Allied governments are willing to sacrifice mancers and alchemists like her wife to turn the tide of the war. Awesome. It's fantastic. Very strong line. Um, Maybe I'd consider changing mancers to necromancers just because that's the term used in the previous paragraph. Even if you use mancers in your stories, just keep it consistent for the query letter, but not a big deal, not a make or break. Okay, moving on to the third narrative paragraph. It's a race against time. Fantastic. And imperative. I might take that out because I don't think it adds anything. So as you can see, I'm being very, very cut happy. Like in a query letter, you want to have only the information that's 100% necessary. So I don't know that imperative adds. It doesn't take away, but it's just cutting into your word count. It's a race against time that Layla find her wife alive. While the necromancers can raise the dead, they cannot bring back the person that once inhabited the corpse. I love that. That's fantastic. Um, I would maybe consider flipping the order of those two sentences because once again, I think, in our writing, we're trying
Mhm.
to keep the tension high. We're trying to keep people guessing. In a query letter, you just want your agent to understand the story. And I think this is a really strong storyline. You could flip them and say, while necromancers can raise the dead, they can't bring back the person. So it's a race against time for Layla to find her wife alive.
Mhm.
I like that because you're giving them the background,
Mhm.
but I do appreciate what you've done here as well with building a bit of suspense. So, I leave that up to you. Layla knows well that every form of magic comes with a cost, and she's willing to pay the price to ensure her wife survives, even if the corpse she reanimates for information's arrival shortens her own life. So, again, the cost, I would like it maybe if you could put a bit more information. I'm assuming the cost is shortening her own life. Is there another cost that we're talking about?
So every mancer in this world, which is why I use the term mancer, because necromancers are one kind of magic user in this world.
Okay.
There's like pyromancers and hydromancers and alethiomancers and all these other kinds of mancy as a kind of suffix there. So that's why I use mancer, but maybe magic user would probably be
Yeah.
more all encompassing. So for necromancers, yes, with every reanimation, they have to use their own life force for that. So
Okay.
it's shortening her life.
Okay. I love that. I would actually recommend to put that up front. So it doesn't matter about every form of magic. I would say necromancy comes with a cost, the shortening of the user's life, or something like that.
Uh-huh.
But that's a price Layla is willing to pay to ensure her wife survives, even if no, I'd take that last part out because you've
Uh-huh.
already said that. But I would definitely put the cost up front because
Uh-huh.
that adds tension to the story, that adds stakes, that makes it matter, and I think that
Uh-huh.
that's really fantastic. So you've got a really strong narrative here. I think the major things are taking out these specific terms that might not be recognizable
Uh-huh.
and, stating the story in more of a logical way as opposed to kind of building suspense like you would in a book.
Uh-huh.
In terms of your bio paragraph, it's fantastic. It sounds really interesting, like you've had a really, really fantastic journey. I would, and this is only because of advice that I've heard agents give others, particularly on TS Not Ya, which does these kind of query critiques. You've been writing for almost 20 years. That's fantastic. I would maybe say what kind of work you've been writing because, like, if you've been writing short stories and poetry and getting published and submitting to anthologies, that's great. But if you've been writing, books for 20 years that haven't had success, which I don't think is the case for you, but that could be the case for someone, that's not
Yeah.
necessarily a good thing. Also, every guest that I have on this podcast says I've been writing my entire life. So I
Yeah.
think that you want something that kind of distinguishes you more from other people. Like lots of people have been writing for 20 years, but what makes you unique? I'm the
Uh-huh.
co-creator of pitch events. That's great. Professor of English composition. I might start with that, to be honest, because that's a
Mm.
really strong credential. I think I'd probably, after readers like me, put not currently because everyone knows that it's current. Just say I'm a professor of English composition, literature, creative writing. I love that. That's a
Uh-huh.
really strong credential. And I think that you can take out the part off campus. I enjoy working on puzzles. Like this is all really fascinating. It's just not really tied to writing, and you already
Uh-huh.
have that you write for fandom. So I think that that kind of adds your hobbies. Let's see how many words this is actually. So it's 343 words. So I think I might cut that off campus. I enjoy working on puzzles. And instead, because you have some word count to play around with, I would add a little bit more detail in your narrative paragraphs in terms
Uh-huh.
of what secrets does Layla have to keep from the team, setting out clearly what the cost is of that magic, setting out how her wife was taken. Like, was she kidnapped from their home? Was she tricked? Was Layla there? Was Layla gone? So just adding more specifics that would kind of up the stakes, both internal and external. I think you could use that word count a bit more efficiently. Overall, this is a really strong query letter. As I said, do you have any questions or anything you wanted to talk about?
Thank you so much.
Of
Yes,
course.
I I agree with like people don't know because it's a podcast, so they're listening to it. I was nodding the entire time. I don't want to interrupt with like my yes, yes. Like, yeah, I agree. I agree. Definitely, it's yeah, because it's so you're so close to the story that you're writing. It's like how much do you tell or how much do you say? And it's so funny that you mentioned in I forget which of the narrative paragraphs where it's like it should be kind of upfront, right? And I literally like the other day I was telling my students like, okay, your thesis, you can't beat around the bush in academic writing. You just have to like outline, here's what we're going to talk about in body paragraphs 1, 2, and 3, right?
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, but like it's more suspenseful if you leave it like, kind of a mystery. And I laughed and I told them that's fine in like fiction writing, but you can't do that in academic. I could see that kind of, piece of advice being given for a query for, creative writing. I was like, that makes sense to me. It makes sense. So
Yeah.
it's like an essay, right? You gotta prepare the reader for what is coming by giving them
Yeah.
that information. So,
It is.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and the thing is also that you have to keep in mind the context of an agent who's getting hundreds of query letters
Uh-huh.
and, has to sift through them quickly. That suspense may not be doing what it's supposed to do. It may just turn off an agent. If I'm reading something and it's leaving me asking questions about the story, I might not want to read the next 2 paragraphs to see if maybe those questions are answered or maybe they're not. I might just set it aside. But
Uh-huh.
if I see a really strong story that thread that's drawing me in, that has stakes, that has kind of this propulsive plot, that's what's probably going to keep me reading if I were an agent.
Definitely, yeah. I think expanding and restructuring, as you said, because I mean, it's not really a secret. I mean, it's in the title, The Necromancer's Wife, so it's not really a secret. It's only a secret to certain characters within the narrative, which is, part of the reason why, like, she's falsifying those documents to, avoid being sidelined for conflict of interest. Like, you can't join us because obviously you're going to prioritize your wife over the mission. And she's like, yeah, I would. So she has to kind of lie about that, right? So, kind of, I think, as you said, like putting everything up front and being clear about what's at stake, the relationships between these characters and the world that they inhabit, I think is really important, especially for, as you said, someone who's not read anything of this before. So it's just like, I need to step back and remember, yeah, I've been living in this because I'm creating this world, so I know everything about it, but it's like, okay, someone who's just looking at this for the first time won't be aware of all of these little details or like, oh, it'll be revealed in chapter 15 or something. So it's like you have to keep those ideas in mind. So definitely that I agree 100% with what you're saying. I think now it's just a matter of restructuring some of those sentences and adding and expanding and taking out some of those less useful pieces of information, including my bio. I hate talking about myself, so I'm okay with cutting the bio as much as possible.
No, it's a really strong bio, so don't cut too much, but, just anything that doesn't really add much in terms of
Mhm.
getting to know you. I would either make it more specific or cut it because I wanna know you, Lots of people blog, but what makes you special?
Definitely, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I agree. I do have one question about, where information would go if you have, let's say, agent interest, likes on, Twitter events or social media, I should say, not Twitter, just, in general, in terms of likes or interest, they've messaged you or, where would that go in the query itself, in the letter, in like an email, separate kind of message?
Yeah, so in terms of whether you have interest from the agent that you're actually querying, you would put that right in your first sentence. So you would say, "Dear agent, I'm writing because you expressed an interest in my query on whatever pitch event, whatever social media outlet. I'm excited to share with you the necromancer's wife." So you would just start right off with that because right off the bat, you want them to know
Mhm.
that they expressed interest. Sometimes there is a box on Query Tracker where you can indicate whether they did like your tweet, but I would still put it in your query letter because, maybe they're only taking a quick glance at your query letter. In an email query, they're only taking that quick glance, so I would definitely put it right up front in the first paragraph. In terms of editor interest, I've heard varying takes on this, so I really think it depends on the agent. I think that the safest bet is to put that in your last paragraph, in your bio paragraph. Um, or you know what? You don't actually say here if this is a standalone or kind of if it has series potential. So I think that after your narrative paragraphs, you can say this is a standalone or this is a standalone with series potential, which usually is what you'll want to say. And then after that, you can say and has received interest from whatever editor. Typically, you'll put the editor's name, but that was always kind of iffy to me because, you know, so I had interest from two big five editors on my query letter, and I asked them, can I put you in my query letter saying that you have interest? And they said yes. If the editor hasn't given you permission, I don't know if I'd put that. And I also don't know if I'd want to reach out to an editor and say, can I put that I have interest in my query letter? So at that point, it's kind of your own discretion, what you feel comfortable with and what you'd like to do. I mean, of course, you never lie about these things, not saying that you would, but I saw stories about this recently where people say that they have interest from an editor or they say that they even have an offer from another agent and those agents talk and then,
Mhm.
they just throw out your query letter if you're lying. So anyway, yes, so I would put the agent interest in the first paragraph. I would put the editor interest towards the end. And once you get to the point where you're getting full requests, that's also something that you can put in your query letters. Some agents, particularly in the UK, will tell you to notify them if you've got full requests. US agents generally don't ask for this, but sometimes for those agents that I was querying, if I already had full requests when I was sending them my query, I would just put in that first paragraph. It's a 110-word adult low fantasy, and I have had like 10 agents ask for my full or something like that.
Mhm.
Just to show that there's interest, that sometimes helps to get things moving a little bit quicker. But again, you only say that once you actually have those things to back it up.
Exactly. A companion to that question would be, because I think I'd seen online people talking about this, to not really mention that there are other agents also interested in this, like multiple let's say multiple agent likes on a pitch, okay?
Oh, okay, okay, multiple
You know what
agent
I mean?
likes, no. No, I
It
wouldn't
doesn't
mention that.
matter.
No.
It only matters if you get, like, a request from other agents to let them know that it's been requested.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even if an agent reaches out and requests that you send the query, I wouldn't mention that. I would only and I wouldn't mention partial requests, even though some agents, just do partial requests and not fulls. But I would only mention full requests just because that's kind of what I've been aware agents in certain jurisdictions are interested in. So I would say that I wouldn't say if you have agent likes or requests or anything like that, because that's not really showing that they've committed to your work, but asking to read your full manuscript shows a commitment. So, yeah,
Definitely. Great. Okay, that's perfect. Thank you.
of course. Well, Crystal, thank you so much for being here. This has been fantastic. Thank you once again for your bravery, for sharing your work. I really think that this is a strong query letter, and I wish you all the best with it.
Talia, thank you so much. I really appreciated your time and your feedback. Definitely. It's been super helpful. Thank you so much.
And thank you all so much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this bonus episode, and remember to tune in next Tuesday for a new episode of the Pros podcast.